Well, the Milwaukee Brewers have a bunch of different options over at third base, a bunch of them, a bunch of in-house options. There's also a few names left on the free agent market, not named Bregman, we'll get to, and one particular to see if his career could bounce back. Maybe Milwaukee could be the cure. We'll get to all that coming up next here on this edition of Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Seems to me we had this issue last year at this time. Who was going to play third base? They got Ortiz, but was he going to play second in case Turang did not have a very good spring training? Was he going to play shortstop if Adames was going to get traded? Well, Turang had a pretty good year, and Adames stayed, and Ortiz moved over to third base after initially platooning early in the season, but he won the everyday third base job, did a nice job over there, but I think I like him better at shortstop. And unless the Brewers are going to go out and get themselves a shortstop, which seems highly unlikely, third base seems to be the position we're looking at right now. So if you look at the Brewers' depth chart, they have Ortiz playing shortstop and third base. I don't know if he's going to play both positions, but he's probably the best option at covering both holes right now. I mean, the guy is amazing defensively, but in all reality, the Brewers have 6 options, in-house options at third base. Well, 7. The 7th one really isn't ready yet, but 6. The number one option, obviously, is, I think, Sal Frelick. He hasn't played there. They tried him out there during spring training last year. To me, that is the number one option. The number one in-house option is Sal Frelick. I'd put him over at third base and grow over there while you're still trying to contend. You know, the Brewers are fortunate that everybody in this division really hasn't done anything in the offseason. I mean, has anybody really gotten any better? Besides the Cubs, getting Presley and getting Kyle Tucker, I thought were 2 big moves. But I regress here and talk about the third base spot. Frelick is now my number one option at third base. If I'm Pat Murphy, I'm looking at that and saying, well, I'm going to try him over at third base because my other options right here, Durbin, I want to see him hit major league pitching. Okay. I don't know if he's ready or not. I told you I've had reservations about a guy 5'6" playing third base, and I'm sure he's going to have a shot at winning that third base job. But I like a more seasoned guy over at third base right now. And if Durbin's got to spend some time in AAA, I'm okay with that. But Sal Frelick would be my third baseman. People have mentioned Andrew Monasterio. Monasterio is a great fallback plan, okay? He is great to have on the team because he could do everything for you. Remember last year he had that game-winning home run in I think Wednesday or Thursday afternoon, late in the year at AmFam Field during the summertime. Monasterio, he's a utility guy, not an everyday guy. Thought he played a little bit too much 2 years ago. And last year, well, just about right. Move him around a little bit. A guy who's never going to complain, be a great teammate, keep Monasterio where he is in the utility role. Dunn was good for about 3 weeks, and then he was all done. Capra, no. And that's it. You have 5, 6, if Ortiz is going to play there, and you find yourself another shortstop. The other option I said, he's not ready. Brock Wilken is not ready for Major League Baseball just yet. He's going to get some licks in during spring training, but he's not ready for the Major League level just yet. Which takes us to the free agent market right now. The free agent market, obviously most of you guys think I'm crazy when I say Bregman, the Brewers should ante up and pay for Bregman and take their shot at it. Apparently there are 3 teams really interested in Bregman, and of course the Brewers are not one of them. They never are. But Bregman would be my number one candidate. But anyone not named Bregman, and one I think is the best shot to take. I'm not really a fan of any of these, but I think the Brewers are going to take a shot at one of these guys. My gut feeling is one of these guys will be brought in. I don't think it's Luis Urias. He was non-tendered by Seattle, at 191 last year. We know Luis Urias, and Urias, some of us were a little uptight when he got traded to Boston a couple of years ago. Turned out Urias, he never had better days, but Urias is not an everyday third baseman. In fact, I don't even know he's a major leaguer at this point anymore. So that's that. Madrigal is still out there. No power, nothing. Jace Peterson, 35-year-old Jace Peterson is out there. He was DFA'd by Arizona and then released. Jace Peterson, I wonder if the Brewers would just bring him in just to have a look at him. Former Brewer and all that. I wonder if they would just maybe possibly bring him in. Madrigal, I briefly talk about him now. The guy who I think they might bring in, and I asked a friend of mine today who covers the Brewers. I just sent him a text. Said, who's going to play third base for the Brewers? And he said, Moncada. Yoan Moncada. And I said, that's funny. I was just doing some research on his career and all that and see what actually went on there. Because Moncada was considered a hot prospect coming. He was supposed to be considered one of the best ever out of Cuba. A hot prospect. The White Sox gave him, at the time, the richest extension in club history, 5 years, $70 million. It still might be. 5 years. It was a number one prospect, and he had all the tools. 5-tool guy. Okay. And he came to the league and he struck out a lot. He had a real good year in 2019. The 25 home runs in 2019. Turns out in 2019 was his best year, because the most since 2019 was in 2021 when he had the 14 home runs. So he hasn't had a year since 2019. 2021, his best year since then, or his best year since 2019 was the 14 homers in 2021. Injuries, a lot of back issues, and no longer part of the White Sox, and no one has taken a shot at him. I hope he kept his 5 years, $70 million, whatever was left from after paying all the fees, the agent fees and all that, because I'm thinking that Moncada is going to get himself a minor league deal. And if I'm the Brewers, I'm saying, what the heck? Why not take a shot? Am I bowled over completely on Moncada? No, but you could go to a mixtape on YouTube, a highlight reel, and he's going to go out there and he can look like Jackson Churio out there with all the great stuff he can do at the plate. But the problem is he's a strikeout issue, swinging and missing. More so early in his career, he was striking out looking a lot. He wasn't getting the bat off his shoulder. But they've corrected that. Now he's striking out, swinging and missing a lot. So I would say this. 2022, he batted .212. 2023 had a back injury. Last year, he was not very good either. I would check him out just to see if what's going to cost you to sign him to a minor league deal. Sooner or later, some of these guys are going to be agreeing to deals. Bregman probably overplayed his hand a little bit. He's not going to get nearly what he wants with Houston. It sounds like he's coming back to crawl to Houston and saying, that 5-year, $180 million deal that you offered me or whatever it was, is it still there? I'll take it. It's like the guy who left his wife for another woman down the street. Turns out that woman moved on him and had no interest in him. And he's going back to his ex-wife, and his ex-wife said, no, you left once. You ain't coming back into the house. Well, with Bregman, that $180 million deal might have been there one time for the Astros, but that price, I believe, has come down. And I think that's why the Brewers should get involved in this. I think the Brewers should get involved in this. But Moncada would be the Brewer option. Low risk, low money, minor league deal, invite him to camp, one of those sort of things. And I think that's the way it would be. I mean, you could invite Jace Peterson, I suppose. There's a reason why he was DFA'd and released by Arizona. A good utility guy maybe at this point at 35. But I'm not looking for utility guys. I got one with Monasterio. Moncada would be my option. Why not? Why not go out there and give him a deal, small little deal? Nobody else is doing it. Nobody else, unless on his side, his agent is just saying, let's hold out for a deal. Let's hold out for a deal. Maybe some third baseman in the offseason is going to hurt his shoulder tearing up a phone book. I don't know. Some of these agents have weird ideas. But there's a reason why Moncada hasn't signed. Major League Baseball is down on him, and he's probably not going to get a deal. So he's going to have to take a minor league deal somewhere. And why not here if the Brewers need him? Again, I'm not saying, oh, God, I'm in love with Yoan Moncada. Not at all. But I'm in desperation mode for a third baseman because Durbin, Monasterio, Frelick, Dunn, and Capra. That's my list. And Frelick is my best possible option there. And I'm not bowled over about moving Frelick to third base. I'm not tripping over myself to make that move. But I think that's the move the Brewers are going to make if they don't bite somebody to camp. Unless between now and spring training or into spring training, the Brewers surprise the heck out of us and make a move, which I don't expect to happen. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers. Coming up next, John Axford, or as Yuki called him, Axie. Axie gets his due in the Wall of Honor with the Milwaukee Brewers. We'll talk about that Wall of Honor and all that coming up next here on this edition of Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Oh, that Gametime app, man. Going to a concert this weekend that I got my tickets on Gametime, and I'm telling you, whether you want to wait for that final hour to get a ticket or if you want to do it in advance, it's a game. It's a game, and that's why it's called Gametime. Do you want to wait right up to Gametime while those tickets are there? Do you want to think the prices are going to drop a little bit? Either way, Gametime is just an amazing place to buy tickets, especially last-minute tickets, but tickets at any time. They got a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. It filters out all the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste your time searching for thousands of tickets. But I'm one of those guys who will search, and I have no problem with it. And this Gametime app is going to make it really easy on you to buy tickets. You want to get Bucks tickets, concert tickets like I got, theater, maybe comedy, opening day tickets for the Brewers coming up. Well, we got a long way to go between now and then, but still, there's plenty of seats. There's plenty of events this winter yet that you can get your seats on Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB, $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB, LOCKEDONMLB, you get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Gametime. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Good to get you along here, whether you're following me on Google, Spotify, Apple, you're downloading the podcast. The audio version is on all podcast platforms everywhere. We're the number one Brewers podcast on the internet. And beginning in about a month from now, we'll be going to daily again. We're about 3 times a week right now during the off season. But we ramp up. And of course, once we get to the season, if you have not been with us through the season, we're here every day during the season, Monday through Friday, talking Brewers baseball with you. And of course, hit us up on our growing YouTube page, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. John Axford gets into the Wall of Honor. The Brewers have a couple of different ways you can go here. They have the Walk of Fame, which is just outside the left field seats as you walk into the ballpark. And those are for the Paul Molitor's, the Robin Younts, the Harry Daltons, people who've made major impacts over a long period of time with the Milwaukee Brewers, Raleigh Fingers, guys like that. Well, even though Fingers was only here 5 years. The Brewers treat fingers, especially Seeley, like Raleigh played his entire career here. Raleigh went into the Hall of Fame as a San Diego Padre, and we treat him like he's a Brewer Hall of Famer. Well, although he did win a Cy Young and an MVP here in 1 year. Strike short in a season, that was. But John Axford, I regress again, Wall of Honor, has the save record, most saves in a season, 46 in a row. He had a save streak from 2011 through 2012, and it was broken. It was like 50-something. And that was a record. That was one of the longest save streaks in baseball history. Although he did have that streak busted in the postseason against Arizona in Game 5 of the NLDS, the game the Brewers came back and won, but that doesn't count for the streak because it's a postseason. But anyway, Axford, 2011, he got some Cy Young votes, some MVP votes as well, when he had the 46 saves and 1.95 earned run average. What I thought was incredible with John Axford was he was bouncing around after, like most closers do, lose it. And the Brewers got him in a trade 10 years later in 2021. So at age 38, in 2011, he's 28 in the prime of his career. But in 2021, at age 38, he's trying to make a comeback in his career. And he came back and he had the arm injury. Got one out, had an arm injury, and that was it. And Axford talks about a story that on a conversation he had with Bob Uecker. Axford, a couple of days after the injury, he was deciding, much like, many players have to do. If they get an injury late in their season, late in their career, what am I going to do? Am I going to retire or am I going to have the surgery done? So Axford's wondering, gosh, do I want to go through the 18 months of tedious rehab with this Tommy John surgery or just retire? Well, he had a conversation with Bob Uecker one day, and Uecker told him, hey, your decision is you already know what you're going to do. You only get a shot or two at playing in Major League Baseball. So Uecker motivated Axford to have surgery. He went through the 18 months. He played back on the Canadian national team in the Olympics, I want to say. And that was it. And that was his end of his career. But Uecker gave him such a pep talk. And he went on to say that Axford would say that, yeah, Uecker was always like one of us, one of the guys. And if you really wanted a shoulder to lean on and to talk about stuff, sure, Uecker was the guy around the clubhouse, would tell jokes and all that. Broadcaster part of the team. He's one of the few guys like that who, the players looked at as one of the players. But if you really wanted to, and Uecker was a former player, even though he jokes about it, Axford leaned on Uecker for some advice. Uecker gave it. And Axford said he threw out a few words there that you wouldn't use on a podcast, at least this podcast, and motivated Axford into going through rehab and coming back. But he got one more out before that injury. He got that one out, and then he came out of the game. But he got one more out with the Brewers, and that was the way his Major League career had ended. But John Axford going into the Walk of Fame. The Walk of Fame, the Wall of Honor is for the players who maybe aren't good enough to get into the Walk of Fame. They go into the Wall of Honor with the Milwaukee Brewers, which is cool. Hey, any Wall of Honor is a good thing. I'd love to get on the Wall of Honor of my high school someday, but it doesn't sound like that's happening. That's for another story. Pat Murphy, Matt Arnold get their awards. Plus, we'll talk about, it's been approved that they're going to winterize Miller Park. We talked about that. And the Brewers winter warm-up, where is it? We'll get to all that as we finish out the show here on Locked On Brewers. Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen to every day here on Locked On Brewers. Appreciate it. And, of course, the platforms you can get us on. And hit me up on Twitter. You can't see it right now if you're on YouTube. Somehow it's blocked, but I got to figure that out. Chuck Freeman Freimund. I'm going to start out with Pat Murphy and Matt Arnold. They both got their awards on Saturday night. The Baseball Writers Association of America, which votes on Manager of the Year awards and Executive of the Year awards. They got both of those. Murphy looked great in his tux. So did Arnold, but Murphy's tux a little different and looked terrific. And he's ready for the season. He just talked about how special 2024 was, and we'll see what 2025 brings to him. It's up to Matt Arnold to get him some groceries to cook the meal. That's what it is. It's up to Matt Arnold to get him some groceries, like a third baseman. So Pat Murphy doesn't take the blame if this team gets off to a slow start. You know, that's my fear. Since the team obviously got worse in the offseason. Okay, and Vegas has got them, at 82.5 wins. And, remember last year the Brewers were at 76.5. But 82.5, down from 93 wins, what the Brewers had last year. So the Brewers, according to Vegas, are taking a regression. And I believe Vegas in this one. If certain guys don't have big years because of some of the guys. And I don't want Murphy to take the blame. It was great last year. No one complained about Pat Murphy at all. I mean, we went the whole year. Sure, there was a couple of games, but nobody really said, boy, Pat Murphy's doing a terrible job. Get Ricky Weeks in there. His assistant coach. Get him in there. We didn't have any of that. And my fear is, again, you win with the Jimmies and Joes. That means, in layman's terms, you win with guys who've got talent. Okay, those are the guys who get you places. Those are the guys who get you Manager and Executive of the Year awards. Okay, so Murphy had a lot of things go right, and he had a good team. He had a good team in many phases. I just think that I hope if he gets off to a slow start or he's struggling a little bit this year, people aren't blaming Murphy because, again, I feel like there's a regression this year. So, but it was cool to see Murphy and Arnold in tuxedos. We're going to get robotic umps apparently for some spring training games. Maybe they should use that in the NFL for any games the Chiefs are playing in. Well, they probably, I'm not going to get into that. The Brewer winter warm-up. Some of you have asked me about that because between the Super Bowl and the conference finals, the Brewers over the years would have their winter warm-up. When you go down to downtown, they'd rent, the convention center down there. They'd bring all the players in and all that. But they're quietly not doing it this year. Quietly not doing it. Last year, remember, it got snowed out. We had that blizzard in the middle of January last year, and it got snowed out. They moved it up a couple of weekends last year, and it got snowed out. Now, no one has asked the Brewers about this, but from what I understand, it sounds like they lose money on this deal because they got to bring in players and all that. They got to pay for tickets. They got to pay for hotels and for their family and all that. They got to pay for all these expenses for these guys to get to town. And also, they got to rent out the facility. So it sounds like the Brewers lost money on it. Not that it's not, who cares if you lose money? Well, I mean, not who cares, but you're doing something for the fans here. But I have a feeling, and the Cubs have a 3-day winter fest. Brewers need to step up and get that winter fest back. I mean, you were in first place last year. Let's get people start thinking about baseball. And you got ticket sales coming up. Now, here's what I'm thinking. You're winterizing AmFam Field. It's been approved. And when I say winterizing, if you go in there right now, it's just as cold inside as it is outside. But the heating ducts, they're opening up the heat. They're putting heating ducts. They're going to make that thing heated like a swimming pool, like how you would heat your basement. It's going to be warm. It's going to be really warm. So when they're going to winterize that thing, this is where you got to bring back the Brewer Fest and have it at AmFam Field. This is another event where you can use that facility like you should in the wintertime. But I'm hoping next year, my thoughts are bring back the Brewer Winterfest and put it at AmFam Field where it's heated. So you don't have to go down to the convention center in downtown Milwaukee and rent that thing out. If you're talking about saving expenses, you're it's in-house. You're holding right in your own house. Sure, you have to pay for players to come back in town, but that's a minimal amount of expense considering all the other expenses you have, wasting money on players and arbitration and all that. So let's bring back the Brewer Fest and bring that Winterfest into AmFam Field when it's winterized by next year. That's going to do it for me, Chuck Freeman. Hey, man, thanks for everybody for watching us and listening to us. Locked On Brewers, you get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, on all the major downloads. YouTube, our growing YouTube page, search Locked On Brewers. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. That'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman, thanks for making us your first listen. You want to make a second listen, you ought to. Locked On MLB, our guy Sully has got all the news around the Hot Stove League in Major League Baseball. That's Locked On MLB. My show, Locked On Brewers. Talk to you in a couple of days, everybody. You've been listening to Locked On Brewers on the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.